Okay, all right, so here's the video. It looks like it's fairly lined up. So for the folks who aren't here, last week we did the very light pale blue to be this area or the light area of the sunbeams, and we painted in the orange and the green fairly randomly and loose and let them run together. I tried to keep it kind of soft and organic. When I came in this morning, I sprayed with a toothbrush more masking fluid onto this. That'll protect the work that we did last week so that it shows through and will help us have detail. Before I move on, I'm going to also do the same thing. So think of the masking fluid as negative. It protected the what we did last week, but now I'm going to add to it by flicking new paint in. So we'll have lighter and darker.
So you're flicking orange and green in?
And I'm going to darken some of it by adding a little bit of purple to it. Trying to look at my photo all the time and putting the right colors in the right place, more or less. This takes the place of a lot of work that you would have to do individually painting a lot of leaves. I'm trying to simplify the process and still have it read right when we're done. Now what I can do is, I don't want all of that to be hard, so I will...
Is that water or
This is water. Whenever I use the purple one, that's the alcohol. Water is always in the clear one.
Oh,
Just so I remember.
it is. I haven't tried the alcohol yet.
So we've got that. We're going to do a little bit more. Now you get a different look. So the stuff that went on that was, while it was dry, was very hard circles, and now the circles are spreading out. They're schmutzing. I'll take a little bit of that purple and mix it with the orange, and that'll darken that up quite a bit. Okay. And while this is drying, I can move on to do I'm going to give a good dose of water to the area where the sunbeams are, because I don't want, in my demo that's over on the wall that I did the week before, my failure, as it were, the sunbeams are really, really hard, and I didn't like that look. So I'm gonna, by having this wet and painting the dark shape rather than trying to paint the light shape, I'm painting the darker shape, this gray that's behind the sunbeams. That's what I'm trying to achieve, and by having the paper wet, it should bleed into the sunbeams rather than be a hard edge. So basically I'm going right down the middle of the dark area with my brush. You see that's softening out without me having to try to paint the sunbeam lines. They are actually showing up nice and soft. If it runs in because of the tilt of the table, I can just come in with my brush. Just do that. That is much more the way I wanted that to look. Very happy with that already. Get some water in there, and we can do the same thing here. To get this cooler color that I'm using for this, I took some Payne's Gray as well as some ultramarine blue, and it's a very thin down mixture. But now what we have is what I wanted. Although the sunbeams are really warm here, and I'm showing them more as paper white, I can get away with that by using the background to be cooler. So that's how we're kind of achieving that. And while I'm here, I'm just gonna start to put in, over on this side, there are some tree shapes. I'm just gonna start to put them in, just a reference for them. They don't have to look like too much right at this point. Okay, I'm gonna soften the edge of that beam, and I'm gonna try and lift out here, keep it white. That's where it ran in.
Blue is the ray of light.
No, actually the blue is the darker bit.
It's the dark.
The ray of light is this very light
White.
bit. Yeah.
Which would be like
Oh,
a sort
I
of,
was confused
I
too.
don't know, beige-ish.
Yeah, I'm actually making a decision to shift this so that this goes, all of this becomes cooler. So rather than it be brown with a light yellow, it's really gonna be more of a gray with a white of the paper as the color. I think it's gonna pop more.
It won't be so confusing.
I think that's, yeah. I can still come in and make that tone more neutral towards the end, but in this first wash, again, we wet the whole area, the whole cone here, this triangle, so it was good and wet, and I came in with that thin color, which was Payne's Gray and Ultramarine Blue that I put over here, and I just put it in and let it bleed out into where the sun lines are, the sun streams are, and then if it got too far in, I just came in with a wet brush and just mopped it up. And now I think we've, compared to what we have over there on the wall with those really, really hard edges, I think this reads much better. I think this is giving us what we want. So at this point, we've added masking fluid to the top half. I let that dry, and then I came in and painted or flicked in some color in here as well. And then we've done this bit. Before we head back to the tables, I'm gonna do one more thing, and that's start to put the ground in. I'm gonna flip the board upside down. I tend to always try to paint with the way gravity was gonna do it anyway, so that it, I guess the direction of flow is the way I would want it to be. And this again, right now, we're just building up some tone, so I'm not trying to be fussy. I'll take some of that cooler color and run it into this brown color. Varying your color down here is useful. And then that kind of runs into a green by where the bottom of the sunbeams are. And I think I can put some green in here. I can't really see that, but I'm gonna make it up. Just run it along there. At this point, I'm trying to remember that I'm not trying to finish the painting all in one shot. I'm just trying to get some background in there that we will add more texture on. The thing to watch out for is that I keep the sunbeams open. Okay, so that's a very little bit. It was just the start of the foreground, but just by getting that little bit of foreground in there, now we're starting to set the table. Now we know what's in front. The tree's gonna be the middle section. There's this section of darks that's kind of the back that sets everything off. And then the showstopper is gonna be the leaves and the branches and these sunbeams. So we're setting the table for everything. I think that's as far as I wanna take it. That's about 10 minutes. Let you guys go back and work for 20, and then we'll come back and we'll do a little more when mine is dry.
Carl, with regard to the masking fluid,
Yes.
we did a layer of masking fluid in the very beginning.
I did.
To protect the white spaces. this second application, where did you apply the masking fluid?
So I put a piece of paper towel here and taped it to block the bottom, and I did it all across the top. All of these really dark spots
Yeah,
were because my masking fluid had some paint in it, so I could see it.
okay,
So what's going to happen is when I pull away all of the masking fluid, I'll get the white from the original,
yeah.
but then all of these will now start to show the color that we painted last week. So what we see in the background is still going to be there for where the masking fluid is now. We're going to have to start to develop some detail and do some of the clumping of the leaves next. So that'll be, we'll get a little bit darker and we'll start to define some shapes.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we're back. I really like how this area is developing with the light beams. They're nice and soft and kind of squishy the way I wanted them to be, kind of like the photo. Much better than the first attempt at the painting that I had done. I do want to deepen this. I think the background still needs a little bit more tone. And I am going to throw a little tiny bit of brown into that blue to neutralize it just a little bit. Take it away from the cool, but not a lot. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to re-wet this area. I'm going to redo this area, do a little bit of this. But I also wanted to show you here what I did in this big field of orange and green that I have here. I've now drawn some of the shapes of the leaves, and what I will do is paint around those with this background color so that we'll start to get these popping out from the neutral color of the background. And also, as you go further up, it becomes more of the orange and less of the background color. So where I drew the shapes in up in the top, I just put my pencil mark in there to remind me that this is going to be one that I'm painting the dark inside of the shape and not around the shape. So what we're going to do first is wet our paper again here. Going with my clean water. I am trying to keep this as clean as I can imagine in this area. Other areas, if I hit the wrong water bucket, it doesn't matter. And ultimately, it really doesn't matter all that much. But look at how juicy wet I am getting this. The streaks, the background around the streaks. That's nice and wet and shiny, as we've talked about with what it means for paper to be wet, is that it's good and shiny. This is the 300-pound paper for this painting, so it's a little bit different than the 140, but not much. It is certainly heavier, and it takes more paint to make some of the darker colors. Okay, so that's set. We've got it sitting there. It's nice and wet. Now let's grab some of our Payne's Gray and a little bit of blue. But like I said, I'm going to cool that off a little bit. So let's. I'm going to warm. Sorry, I'm going to warm up that cool color a little bit with some brown. There we go. A little less blue. Now, because we're doing it in layers, we'll still see some of the blue. And we're coming in. And in the in-between areas where the background is, not in the light streaks, but in the area around the light streaks, we are painting in this color. And it's wet, so it's absorbing out. I'm looking at where we went last time and making sure that I'm keeping it to the same sort of shapes. Now we're really developing those streaks. You can really see them.
Where do you see that streak over here?
I'm making it up as I go
Oh, you
now.
made it up.
Yeah. There is a certain.
For asking that.
Yeah, I know, I figured he's got so many streaks, I only have like
I was having trouble following them too.
There is a certain point where you're telling your version of the story.
Yeah, that's good.
This is, I don't want to get too fiddly with this, so I'm just painting in shapes in the lighter and the darker back here. We'll deal with that at a point. That's got that little bit of road that runs back there, so I'm just gonna wipe that out a little bit. So that was that part. But now, like I was saying, I want to get this color. I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. And what we're gonna start to do is define around these clumps of leaves. Because that's actually what is making those clumps of leaves, is painting around them. This is negative painting. So by painting the darker shape, I'm revealing those clumps of leaves.
So you're painting the background now.
Yes, I'm painting the background around these clumps of orange to establish those clumps of orange so that we can decide what we want to do with them. You know, do we need to make them darker? Do we need to add more leaves into them? But we need to have that separation at some point. I'm not too worried about having a soft or hard edge here in this sunbeam because I'm gonna have leaves that pop right down through there, so that won't really be a big deal if I don't have that soft an edge. And like I was saying, as you get up into here, rather than painting around the shape, now you start painting the shape. So instead of painting around to make these shapes become visible, now I'm painting the dark where there are spots of the background poking through. And that gives you that definition. And it's a transfer. It's going from the lighter of the leaves having less real estate. There's more background in there. And then as you go up, it's more of the leaf shape. And as you get in here and you do this background, the other thing to do with it is mix it up. Have some, you know, I'm constantly going back and forth, adding some orange to it to warm it up, adding some blue to it to cool it down. And, you know, you get up to about here and then you don't see that massive shape anymore. Now we're starting to get a tree. And you can on this side, you can do some of the same thing. Paint into the shape a little bit with some orange. Very thinned out at this point. That'll be like a green clump. But we can get some of that shape. Just remember to keep that sunbeam soft. One of the things to make sure you do is try not to be too regular with your shapes here. Have them be erratic. They'll look more natural if they're not perfectly shaped. There, get some dark in there.
It's really hard for me to see that part that you're doing now.
It's just the background.
No, but you have to think in reverse.
Yeah, exactly.
You absolutely are thinking in reverse because, and that's so much of watercolor is planning so that you can do this so that you can use your background to reveal
Yeah, the thing is
something
we're
like
here
that.
to relax. It's not relaxing. You gotta think.
Don't panic.
I guess maybe drawing in the pencil.
And I did that. I did draw in those shapes so that I could.
Then you could follow that a little bit.
And now I've just taken this green and just built it up a little bit into the bow of the tree there. And I'm making a couple of leaves that pass in front of the tree just so that we know where they are in the green. And I can darken that a little bit by throwing some purple into my green. And that's all we're gonna do for now. So it's another pass at this, and then I'm starting to define the shape of the tree by painting around the tree shapes. Because basically we painted in all this orange here, and now we're using the background to carve out the tree.
How do you know
Yes.
where the masking fluid is going to?
Well, that's part of the randomness of it, that, you know, nature is random to a degree. There are patterns, but you have to look at them in a certain way. So what's going to happen is you're going along, and then we'll get near the end and we'll remove the masking fluid, and then we'll have to say, okay, now we've got all this depth, we've got white spots, we've got middle spots, we've got dark spots. What do I need to do?
Okay.
And then we tie it all together with the tree and the branches. That's what becomes the glue.
I see.
Okay. And also, don't be afraid to have some of these edges be soft and some of them be hard.
Carl,
Yeah.
I'm really stuck.
Okay, I'll be right there.
Okay, I just don't know where to go next.
Well, you jumped into the painting halfway, so that's
Yeah.
not surprising.
Carl's gonna come over. Let me know where to go next.
And guys, this is not an easy painting. Okay, we are back. I really like how the sunbeams are turning out. I've got that separation, that it feels foggy, and I've got that soft edge on them, so I'm really happy with those. I did notice, and I did make a slight adjustment, that the background on to the right of the tree starts to get darker. I think probably because the tree is throwing some shade there. So this little triangle got darker, and it starts to get darker in here. I think that the mass of the background shape is a bit darker on this side of the painting than here, and then gets a little bit darker again here, which I think helps focus here. What did I do while you guys were working? I did put a little bit more of the ground in, and oops, sorry. Sorry about that, everyone watching at home. Okay. Yeah. Let me just grab a piece of scrap paper. So It's a little bit easier on the 300-pound paper of the cold press because it comes out a little bit rougher. But if you get some paint on your brush and then take some of it out, you can do these really beautiful textured marks without having to, without having to try to paint them in. That's what I did down here to start to develop the ground, is just mixed up the colors and just drag. This is called dry brush, when your brush is mostly dried out and you've got paint in it and you're letting the brush take some of the decisions out of your hands. If you tried to draw this stuff in, you'd make yourself nuts. But see how realistic it can look without having to do too much? So that's how I did that. I think at this point, I want to establish some of the shape of the tree so that we have it on the painting going forward. I think that'll help me see the things I want to see and help me relate some of the values.
I lost my tree twice, so I painted it.
That definitely happened to me in the last one.
You painted it twice?
I drew it twice,
Oh,
and then it went away.
When you put the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
stuff.
yeah,
And
it
so I
does-
said,
does that.
I'm just gonna paint it brown and see what happens.
And then mine kept getting fatter and fatter. So the trunk,
It's coming in very dark.
and then this section goes up over here. Now, I'm working on dry paper, that's important. And I painted some of this green in so that I could have that shape, because I want to paint around that. I don't want to lose that. And then I'm going to just bring it down the rest of the way.
Are you going to keep the trunk sharp, or are you going?
I'm going to keep the trunk very sharp. And I'm going to also mix it up with a little bit of warmth.
What are you putting in there?
I just threw some orange into the gray just to tone it down a little bit. It gets a little bit lighter there and then it starts to get darker again. So I've kind of separated that out. Give your trunk some bumps. And it's probably at its darkest as we get down here. And it comes down here a little bit. Try to be irregular with it where it lands. And also, we talked about the hard and the soft. In this case, here's where you make it a little soft in a couple of spots. Not everywhere, it's hit and miss, but that's what you want, is those lost and found edges. Makes it look more realistic. And I can come in with a little bit more of the dark, up in like let's call that the armpit there. And again here. And a little bit into the light area because it's still wet, it's gonna do its running thing. There, that's, maybe I'll, and I can come down a little bit, come down to about here. Sunbeam comes to here, so I don't want to run too far into there. And in fact, I want to go out that edge a little bit. Okay. Now we can start to see the tree. And there's a branch that comes up like this, and one that takes off in this direction. Now, as I start to do these branches, I'm going to come back further on my brush. and I will skip. I don't want to do the whole thing. We don't want to do too much of it. We just need to get a reference for it. And this is not the whole tree, but I want to get started on it. Okay, so now we have this landmark in here, and it helps us because now I know that the tree is casting a shadow right up to there, so I can paint that shadow in. Be a little loose about it. And the shadow basically comes right up to the sunbeam and actually gives you a hard edge on the sunbeam. So something like that. Where the sun hits the ground there is nice and warm, and it's still light. So I'm just going to throw the orange in there, and while I have it, get some yellow in there, and then take it back. We want it to kind of glow if we can, something along those lines. I may work that back a little bit yet. That's still a little hard. While it's wet, you have time. There we go. Now, all I did was put the trunk and starts of the branches in, but now look at how it's all starting to feel and come together. We can start to develop. I'm gonna do more of this dry brushing here with a warmer color. And do it between the sunbeams instead of where the sunbeams are landing. So like that actually is too wet, but that's okay. And as you get towards the bottom, you can get orange and green in your brush and just start to, it's darker down here. There's definitely a dark line that we start to see. Get some of this texture in here. And this is just another way of doing texture. Before we were flicking the brush, we could certainly still flick the brush. This comes in across the dark. Now, here's something. As the light, the sunbeam crosses areas that have color in them, you'll still have the color, but it won't be as dark. So you can blot, but that's how you want to treat that is up here. This is a really good example. So we've got these branches that start to hang down in here, and I put them in pencil so I could see them. And start to put them in, okay, like that. And then grab your paper towel in the sunbeam area and start to blot it out. So I probably need to have a little bit more color in there so you can see it. But so like you're going to make these organic shapes. You don't want to be too fussy with them yet, but then come in and where the sunbeam is coming through them, lighten them up. So you get that continuity. And again, you come across here, you blot that out a little bit, and then it gets, actually that's still sunny, so when you get into here, I may be rushing a little bit with my brush, so I gotta be careful. But protect the sunlight area and come in and be stronger in the area that is in the shadow. And try to be organic with these shapes. So this is darker here. Paint this in, but then blot it out a little bit. So you start to get that light coming through those. And that's how I'll treat this over here. And I do have to maybe go to a smaller brush or start to be careful about how I'm treating this, because it was getting a little bit too rushed. And what will happen is these will get connected with some branches that come down that make them their final shape. This is in shade. And the best way to do this is to do some of it, let it dry, and then come back and do more of it so that you're developing even more layers and layers on top of each other. This is gonna need to get darker over here or stronger orange. I mean, that'll be the next section we work on, but we will start to do stuff in here. And above this branch line, we'll start to add these looser shapes in, that when we start to take out all of that masking fluid, we'll really start to do all that hard, heavy lifting for us. Coming back into that area that we started to block out. And I'm just starting to put some more detail into there with the orange. Or not detail, more dark and light shape. And you can blot a little bit of it. So you can see we've got the tree that's in front of the sunbeams. The sunbeams are coming behind it. We've got the ground. We've got the darker color that's further away than the sunbeams. So it's all about these layers. And we'll just keep building up. I don't want to get too dark, and I'm always going to be very cautious of that because of where I went in the last one. But I'll be building up. From here, it's a lot more of the same until we start to remove the masking fluid. Okay, so I have this line here that I feel like I need to make a little bit of a separation for this, where we hit the land. I think the land is more like up here behind the tree. So I am going to re-wet this area again. And the advantage of these paints being staining paints is that they're not moving around when I re-wet them, as long as they're dry. So my goal here is, at this point, I'm going to use colors that are already in the painting and just make a bit of a medium color and come in and go right down that thing again, right where the dark parts of the strokes are, or where the sunbeams aren't, and do the same thing. But I don't want to go all the way down this time. Darker up here, and it comes down to about here. I think that helps it. Pull this right down to the tree, and then I can just blot down at the edges. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the sunbeams alone at this point. This foreground here is a bit darker. I'm not gonna get fancy with this. I'm gonna just have some colors ready to go and come in and just follow the contours of the land. To darken down here. And then where the sunbeams hit, I'm just gonna try and make sure I don't have a hard line there. And maybe down here I'll grab some more green. You could do some of this dry brushing if you want. I might flick some color in there later. I do feel now that this shadow does need to be a bit darker. So I'm gonna pull this right down here. And it actually comes right to the sunbeam. So something like that. Just fade it out at the end. So there's my shadow. Get some more color in this edge. Now I'm going to kind of dance my brush around, leaving some of that color underneath exposed. Make sure I leave that edge soft, okay? I may come back and do another pass at this, but I don't want to take up all you guys' time on this, so I'm just gonna, here it's wet, so I can just tap some paint in, do wet and wet, just so we've got, some textural differences going on down towards the bottom. It should kind of remind you of of leaves on the ground without you actually having to paint the leaves. And I may go in and do that darker yet, but that's where I am at this point. Just putting the ground in here.
Are we finishing up next week with this?
I'm gonna finish and bring it to class, and then I'll work with you guys on finishing it. I think that's the way to go. So, well, actually, let's put it to a vote. I mean, do you want to have time to finish it? Are you completely done and don't ever want to see this again?
Yes.
I'd like to move on.
Okay.
I'm gonna finish it at home.
Then that's
I'm gonna finish mine at home too.
then that's what I'm gonna do too. Okay.
And then
To the best
let's
of
have
our
spring,
ability.
summer.
Oh, water.
Go to another season.
Water.
We did some water, yeah.
We did some water, must have missed that one.
Okay. What I also want to do is bigger brush, slightly thicker color, is start to develop these, continue to develop these larger shapes, and do them by being very loose and painterly. Don't try to do much with them. Just get some color in there and break up the shape. That may be all I need to do for that. It gets darker here. I can dry brush this in.
Probably should do this over again.
And I'll just soften that edge, okay. Again, use the dark orange
And then maybe use another
over here
twist and make a little leaf.
and make it just
You know what I mean? Just simplify this.
random shapes.
So do it again. See how it, is this one more?
This is kind of the top layer.
Oh.
So we'll do a little bit more there. Couple of dots there. And don't make these too, break the shape up so that they don't look too much like a round blob.
Time to let the dog out of the crate.
Okay. You can always
That time.
tap a little bit of it back. And I can negative paint a little bit of this green shape here to develop some of these shapes.
your flowers, the one you showed me the last time I was here too, so the new flowers. Oh, gorgeous.
Loosen this up a little bit and just get some green going in here.
This could get too complicated.
Yeah, it's just, walking on the street now. Yeah, and if you're a walker or you've done it,
So I had one maybe 20 years ago.
Okay.
pretty good.
Carl, are you gonna do more branches?
I'm gonna do the branches right now.
Okay.
What I'm gonna do is I'm going to dry this. I'm gonna do some branches, and then I'll remove the masking fluid.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna dry this. Branches are the last bit, and I'll have the reveal.
The floating tree.
Susan, I really want to see yours next week. I hope you continue with it.
So, you should see Diana's. It's gorgeous.
That looked great too, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, something about it, the colors and the shapes and the red and the darks and.
Yeah, see, I'm gonna, it looks almost, it has to get, I take it off, there's a lot of glue, but this one came off with my masking tape. As you can see, it's whiter than this. So I'll do that.
Okay, so I'm gonna put some branches in, and they're pretty dark. So I'm gonna mix up some purple, some blue, and some of the green together. And I'm using a liner brush for this. And I'm looking at the photo.
So I've debated, but I now, yours has some. Goodbye, Carl. See you next week.
See you next week. One of the keys is to break these things up so that they're not completely perfect lines. And there's a big branch along the top.
Thank you for that. I feel like
And I think when it comes to the branches, it's kind of less is more.
Bang, bang. Have a good one.
All right, pretty much everyone has gone. Sam is still here. That's okay. We have plenty of time left. Yeah. No, I think this painting scared him off. What I'm gonna do at this point, now that the painting is dry, is I'm gonna come in and we can. I am removing the masking fluid.
The masking fluid I used seems to change the texture of the paper.
Oh, okay.
Daniel Smith.
The thing that I'm noticing is that I will probably have to go back in and soften the edges of the bigger sky holes, because right now they're pretty hard. But I do like how it's revealing some of the layer from last week, along with the bits of white. All right, there we go. I'm gonna do some finishing touches and I'll bring this to class next week for you guys. And then we'll start a new painting.